I would say a few things. On a more general philosophical scale, I think I would say, in the best case scenario, I'd love trying to stage scenarios that allow people to see things they thought they understood as being closed and oppressive and limiting systems of control, of identity, of communication as actually quite different, as to open up systems that function to close things down and find space inside them for freedom, um, to create hybrid forms of being, to create hybrid forms of identity, to create social situations which are very enjoyable, that involve contact with actual people, but also to critique that at the same time. On the more formal side and the viewing experience of a painting, it's very important to me that people see my work in person, because I'm really trying to develop a different form of space in painting that's this very shallow space that it cannot be communicated through the screen, yet it takes inspiration from the shallow space of the screen. But there's a very three-dimensional element in these paintings that is created through the CGI software that comes from everything being completely synthetically choreographed. And it looks almost like a sculpture. Like, people come up to my paintings and they want to touch them because they can't tell if they're actually three-dimensional, that being the space of sculpture, like a relief, or if they're actually the illusionistic space of painting, which is flat. So playing with the difference between the flat and the three-dimensional, which I think is a very important visual problem of our time, where we never know what's real and what's actual and what's virtual, is something that I really like to play with, but I also try to make it as optically exciting, just to have a very so your your nervous system gets activated in an enjoyable way by looking at something, to hopefully make you want to continue looking at things and not just scrolling, and actually stop and concentrate and look at one thing. We have an enormous screen in this, a very high resolution screen that the gallery was generous in providing. And I think it's going to be quite exciting because you can see the paintings as you walk in still, and you walk around a wall, and then suddenly they start moving. And after you've seen a painting move, you realize how it's made. You realize it's made with this software that's very much a contemporary part of other technologies, other forms of mass media production. And then when you walk out to see that same painting again, I think you see it differently. So I think the moving component of the animated software image actually changes your perception of the still image after you see it. So they kind of work in tandem together. And hopefully, just something that's been important for me for decades is trying to challenge what a painting can be. In the case of this show, it's actually almost making a painting without paint. The paint is the last element that's put back into the painting after the painting is, for the most part, fully constituted without it. It's almost like this supplemental excess, that's the last stage of just marking my hand with these gestural marks, these very thick passages, as well as creating these very expressionistic face filters, I call them. So the heads are almost all expressionistically rendered very carefully by hand, which I, again, think of as like beauty filters. So there's a combination of again, the machine made and the handmade, and then this all gets activated by animation and music to kind of come alive and hopefully make you realize that painting can be something very different than just, the traditional 20th mode of gestural figuration, that it can actually be a much more complicated, oftentimes humorous thing.